For years, there have been rumors that North Korean workers are being secretly used in countries around the world as modern-day slaves.
This is something very serious, I believe. This is what I call modern slavery.
The North Korean regime and those who collude with them in this exploitation don't want the world to know what is going on.
Why were there North Koreans working underground in Sarawak?
There are many, many secrets in the mine. They do not want people to know.
Now stay close.
Tonight, conclusive proof that North Korean men are working and dying at this mine while being used as slaves. Seoul, South Korea, a modern, bustling, economically vibrant city. Its citizens enjoy one of Asia's highest standards of living. Yet just a few miles away, their fellow countrymen live in what is widely regarded as one of the most impoverished, cruel, and repressed societies in the world.
그 과정에서 부분적으로 또는 일시적으로
Kim Seung-chul is a defector from North Korea. He escaped after being sent overseas to earn money for the regime.
남미나 아마 동남아나 아프리카나 이런 데 감옥에 들어가서 일하는 사람들보다도 아마 대우는 더 나쁠 거예요. 먹고 자고 하는 어떤 사람은 온 겨울 내내 목욕도 안 하는 사람도 있으니까 그만큼 생활이 엄청 열악해요. 그리고 사고도 많이 나고.
Kim was sent to work in a Russian logging camp. It was the first time he realized the true nature of the North Korean regime.
근데 그때도 저희가 러시아에 사는 모습, 러시아 주민들이 시베리아 동토지대 아주 깊은 수림에서 사는 러시아 사람들의 생활 수준이 북조선보다 훨씬 나은 걸 보고 충격받고.
But while in Siberia, Kim also witnessed the brutal treatment given to anyone who tried to escape from their North Korean minders.
그러면 이 사람들이 우리가 그때는 잡아서 어떻게 하냐면 다리를 강제로 부러뜨려요. 잡아갖고. 그래서 깁스를 해버려요. 깁스해갖고 환자로 수송을 북한으로 해버려요.
Once disguised as hospital patients, the crippled defectors were flown back to North Korea and sent to detention camps for further punishment. Kim now sends messages about his experiences as a modern-day slave back to North Korea. He tells other would-be defectors how to escape from the clutches of the regime.
어떤 방법으로 우리가 무엇을 어떻게 할 것이냐 이런 것도 알고 용기도 가지고 그리고 이제 아주 체제에 충성하는 그런 사람들한테는 좀 경고도 하고 좀 두려움이나 그걸 갖고 있는 사람한테는 용기도 주고 그런 방송을 이제 우리가 하자고 하는 거죠.
This is how the North Korean regime likes to present itself to the world. A perfectly choreographed display of military might and rigid social control.
The regime itself is, by nature, a regime that is organized on the principle of terrorism, of terror.
Marzuki Darasman leads the United Nations efforts to make North Korea stop torturing and killing its own citizens. He has reported the leadership to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity.
DPRK nationals being sent abroad to work in many parts of the world, laboring under conditions that amount to a subjection to forced labor, both by their own and the hosting governments.
Mr. Darasman believes the North Korean leadership is increasingly reliant for its very survival on overseas workers.
We are dealing with a case where the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is systematically deploying forced workers throughout the world and being welcomed by countries that have then, of course, escaped scrutiny of the international community.
Defectors who have escaped while working overseas are in no doubt about why they were sent abroad.
북한이 해외에 파견하는 근로자를 파견하는 첫 번째 목적은 달러를 벌어들이는 거예요. 말하자면 북한 권력을 유지하는 데 필요한 자금, 정권을 유지하는 데 필요한 자금도 아니고 권력을 유지하는 데 필요한 자금, 말하자면 김정은과 그의 측근들을 위한.
Following the UN's report on human rights abuses, in Seoul, South Korea, Lee Jung-soo has taken fresh testimony from defectors about working overseas.
그 결과물을 이번에 책으로 내게 됐습니다. 이런 조사를 하게 된 배경은 북한 내부에는 저희가 직접적으로 어떤 인권 피해가 있는지 들어가 볼 수 없지만 북한 해외 노동자들이 해외 각국에서 겪고 있는 인권 피해가 상당하다는 사실을 알게 되었고
Today, more than 50,000 North Korean men and women are being used as modern-day slaves in 40 countries around the world.
일단 해외 근로자들을 나가게 되면은 현지인들이 굉장히 기피하는 그런 직종의 배치를 받게 되고요. 러시아에서는 주로 임업지, 그러니까 벌목을 하러 들어가시게 되는 경우가 있고요. 또 중동 지역에는 주로 건설 현장에 송출이 되는 걸로 알고 있고, 중국 같은 경우에는 식당. 그러니까 여성분들이 많이 이제 가시게 되는데 주로 식당이나 공장에서 일을 하는 걸로 파악이 되고 있습니다.
The overseas workers know better than to complain about their treatment.
네, 일단은 많은 노동자분들이 그 송출을 하는 과정에서 북한의 가족을 두고 있는 분들을 대상으로 노동을 할 수 있는 그런 조건이 되기 때문에 또 그 이유는 노동 현장에서 이탈하는 것을 방지하기 위해서 가족들을 북한 정부가 하나의 인질로 데리고 있는 것이나 마찬가지인데
The workers know that their families back in North Korea will be punished severely if they decide to escape. Kim and his family paid a terrible price for his decision to defect.
그러니까 거기서 어머니가 좀 원래 어머니가 좀 건강이 안 좋으셔요. 근데 거기서 이제 좀 사시다가 어머니가 돌아가시고 그러고 형제들도 이제 추방이 돼서 거기서 이제 어렵게 살고 어찌고 이제 하다가 그 사람들도 이제 다 형제들 중에 이제 뭐 우리가 5형제예요. 근데 지금 다 죽고 나만 지금 살아남은 셈이 됐죠. 뭐. 물론 이제 그때 대량 아사 시기에 뭐 함흥에 있었어도 죽었겠죠. 그냥 뭐 저는 그렇게 생각을 해요. 내가 북한에 남아 있었다면 아마 그 대량 아사 시기에 아마 죽었을 거다. 지금 덤으로 사는 거나 같죠. 뭐. 많이 저 때문에 집안이 다 망했죠. 뭐. 다 이제 죽고 자식도 죽고 그렇게 됐죠. 우리 집사람이 나보고 이제 아들 죽었는데도 너는 아무 감정이 없냐 그래. 그냥 그렇다. 그 자꾸 물어보면 내가 그래요. 그 얘기를 자꾸 하지 마라. 깊이 묻어둔 거 자꾸 나는 파헤치기 싫다.
The North Korean regime denies using slave workers overseas and challenges the world to prove them wrong. Kim has decided to take up that challenge. He's going to leave the safety of South Korea to hunt down proof that North Korean workers are being used and abused overseas. He knows that the slave workers have been brainwashed and told to capture any defector they meet and send them back to North Korea for punishment. He's out to capture clear evidence by secretly filming the overseas workers at great risk to his personal safety.
북한 주민의 생명과 공포로 만들어진다. 피로서 만들어진다는 거죠. 유지된다는 거죠. 그 과정에 저항을 하는 놈은 자꾸 죽여버리잖아요. 총살을 해버리잖아요. 그 공포는 뭐냐? 피로서 만들어지는 거다. 그걸 북한 권력이, 정권이 그걸 계속 그렇게 만들어 유지를 하고 있다는 거죠. 권력으로서.
Kim is about to enter a remote coal mine in the jungle to try to speak with North Koreans working here. If they discover Kim is a defector, he could be killed. Kuching is the capital of Sarawak, Malaysia. We've been told that for at least 15 years, North Korean workers have been brought here in secrecy and used as slaves. They have been put to work on construction sites, building apartment blocks and luxury country clubs, laying highways and digging coal in remote mines. Kim Sung-chul has come with us to expose the truth about the regime's use of forced labor overseas.
지금 북한 근로자들이 거기에서 탄광에서 일을 하고 갱 안에서도 하고 밖에서도 하고 있는 걸 알고 있고 작업 조건이 아주 열악하고 외부에 외출이 안 되게 통제를 당하고 있다는 그것을 알고 있습니다. 그리고 지금 월급을 받아서 국가에 기본적인 건 다 바친다는 것도 알고 있습니다.
Gaining access to the coal mine where the North Koreans are thought to be working isn't easy, even for those living nearby. Local farmer Jacob Iman says the mine is on his land, but he can only gain entry when the mine owners aren't looking.
All the secrets in the mine, they do not want people to know. There are many, many secrets. There may be something that they don't want us to see.
Jacob told us that there have been a number of explosions at some of the mine shafts which have scared off local workers.
That type of job is very dangerous. And the local tried it right from the beginning for only sometimes. When they found out, they don't want to go in for whatever money it is, especially inside the mine itself. So probably that's why they brought in the Koreans. And the risk is taken by the people from North Korea. And if they die, then they die.
Kim continues to visit shops and service stations near the coal mine to see if he can find out more. He knows that local television and newspapers in Sarawak reported another lethal explosion at the mine in 2014.
작년 뉴스에서 북한 근로자들이 탄광에서 일하다 사망한 거 알고 그리고 뉴스 조사를 좀 해서 여기 쿠칭에 탄광에서 일한다는 걸 알고 있어요.
Campaigner Claire Rocastle-Brown was born in Sarawak, but is now barred from the country because of her website claims of widespread endemic corruption.
There is an incredibly controlled media in Sarawak and in Malaysia.
Claire was intrigued by the limited news about the explosion at the mine.
This was a story that crept out into the media. I mean, there was a hideous, tragic accident and people were killed. But being that it was Sarawak, the coverage was very limited, so no one was asking who owned the mine, what happened, what was going on, who was working there. It slipped out that the workers were North Koreans, which was extraordinary. Why were there North Koreans working underground in Sarawak?
In the aftermath of the explosion, a Malaysian government minister told the local media for the first time that the government of Sarawak had a special arrangement with the North Korean government to bring in North Korean miners.
The minister came out with this astonishing statement that the reason there were North Korean workers in this mine and not local people was that the local people weren't brave enough, and that the North Koreans only could be relied upon to be brave enough and skilled enough and daring enough to do this work, which begs questions in all directions.
People living in Sarawak were also beginning to ask awkward questions.
When I heard about the incident, the explosion, that's where I asked many of my friends, the villagers, I asked them what actually happened.
Peter John Jaban is one of the world's best-known environmental campaigners. Peter's activities have ensured that he too is kept under close scrutiny by the Sarawak authorities.
According to the local newspaper here, it says that only 4 people died and a few injured. But the actual number of deaths could be more, because I was told by the villagers, because some of the villagers work at the mine, the coal mine site.
The villagers told Peter that most of the men working at the mine were from North Korea.
I said, wow, this is something very serious, because I believe this is what I call modern slavery. So the North Korean workers, yes, they do come to the town, the small town, and they are not friendly with the villagers. I believe that they were told not to mix around with the villagers because of some secrets. Maybe they are trying to hide something from the villagers, or maybe from the public.
Based on his own experience as an overseas worker, Kim knows that the North Koreans at the coal mine are unlikely to be treated fairly.
제가 러시아 벌목공 출신이거든요. 그래서 해외에 나와서 일하는 북한 근로자들이 얼마나 열악한 상황에서 참 힘들게 일을 하는지, 또 그리고 그런 상황에서 그 사람들이 사고가 나거나 사망을 하면 얼마나 비인간적인 대우를 받고 또 취급을 받는지.
Then, while we're stopped for lunch at a local service station, a grey pickup truck pulls in. Local people say they have seen this truck going in and out of the mine, but the men from the mine don't speak to the locals. We secretly film from across the street as the men load some supplies into the truck. They then drive off in the direction of the mine. There was only one way to find out what was really going on at the coal mine, but it wasn't going to be easy.
And it's quite risky to enter the area, because there are a lot of security guards, there are a lot of gangsters as well.
The North Koreans wouldn't allow us in as journalists, so we decided to pretend we were from a European mining company. We even made up a fake business card and decided to film using hidden cameras. We didn't want anyone to know that we were working with a North Korean defector, so Kim stayed out of sight.
Hello. Hello, sir. Hello.
The men we approached appeared to be from North Korea, but none of them wanted to speak.
Can you tell me what country you're from? But what country are these men from? Are they from North Korea? North Korea. And this man, where are you from, sir? What country?
We were told to drive past the miners' living quarters, where we were met by an older man who seemed to be in charge. He wanted to know why we were there.
From a mining company? Yes.
We showed him our fake business card and tried to find out more about who was working for him in the mine.
And the workers who work here, what country are they from?
Many countries.
Okay.
Indonesia, Bangladesh, every country we go.
Are there some from North Korea?
Yes, mix, all mix.
It wasn't clear if he was admitting that North Koreans were still being employed here.
Yes.
By now, 2 cars had approached and seemed about to block our exit. We decided to leave. On our way out of the mine, we stopped and spoke briefly to some of the other workers. They told us that 9 miners, rather than the official tally of 4, died in the explosion. And the bodies of the North Koreans had not been sent back to their families for burial. Instead, they had been burned at the mine. As we left the mine, we saw these lorries drive off towards a coal depot in Kuching. But when we followed them there, the trail ran cold. The only way to find out more about the North Koreans working inside the mine was to go back inside. Only this time, we would take Kim with us.
어떤 근로자들을 만나면 세상은 따뜻하고 인간적이고 자유롭다. 오직 북한 사람만 이렇게 지금 노예처럼 세계 여러 곳에 가서 참 노예처럼 일을 한다. 그걸 좀 우선 알려주고 싶어요. 그리고
We have been told that North Korean workers are being used like slaves at a coal mine hidden away in the jungle of Sarawak, Malaysia. By allowing North Korean workers to be used in their country, Malaysia may be helping the regime to remain in power. The bulk of the overseas workers' wages goes straight back to Pyongyang. Human rights workers in South Korea have monitored the vital importance of overseas workers to the survival of the North Korean regime.
이 사람들은 이제 아무런 권한도 없다는 얘기죠. 왜냐면 국가 소유 다 소유로 돼 있기 때문에. 그러니까 월급이라는 것도 의미가 없어요. 그냥 국가가 다 파견해서 그냥 돈 버는 것들은 국가가 다 관리해가지고 다 뺏어가니까. 그러니까 이게 북한이 변화하지 않으면서 돈은 벌어야 돼 있고. 그러니까 그 차원에서 이제 사람들이 나가긴 나가는데 그게 이제 그 북한에서의 인권 유린이 해외까지 뻗치는 이제 그런 결과이기 때문에 그러니까 이제 그 21세기의 노예 노동이 그냥 공공연하게 국가에 의해서 자행되고 있다. 이게 나는 사실 참을 수가 없었어요.
Defector turned journalist Kang Cheol-hwan has traced the regime's reliance on its overseas workers.
그러니까 북한이 앞으로 이제 해외 근로자들을 파견해서 최소한 10억 달러의 현금을 돌려고 지금 가장 많이 파견된 나라가 러시아였고 두 번째는 중동 지역인데 중동도 이제 거기는 뭐 리비아라든지 뭐 어떤 이란, 시리아 이런 북한하고 이제 우호적인 관계의 나라들이 많이 나왔었고 좀 위험하게 봤죠. 근데 최근에는 중국도 굉장히 많이 나오고 있고 그리고 이제 또 이제 동남아 지역 뭐 이런 뭐 캄보디아, 말레이시아 뭐 이런 나라들도 지금 나가고 있다고 합니다.
The overseas workers' wages are taken in cash to safe houses and then smuggled back to the regime in Pyongyang. The smuggling is coordinated by a shadowy branch of the North Korean secret state.
노동당에서 주관하기 때문에 그 노동당은 이제 39호실이라고 하는 김정일이 비자금 부서가 있고 그럼 거기에 쓰인 돈이 뭐냐면 비자금 쓰거나 또 이제 당 조직 관리 쓰거나 군대 쓰거나 뭐 이 세 가지를 다 보는 거죠. 그러니까 이건 오로지 북한 체제를 유지하기 위해서 외화벌이를 하는 것이지. 이런 것들은 이제 뭐 북한 경제 사정의 어떤 경제 발전이라든지 또 근로자의 어떤 생활 향상과는 전혀 무관한 그러니까 앞으로 김정은 정권이 뭐 핵무기를 포기 안 하고 지금과 같은 이제 미사일도 쏘고 막 계속 그렇게 나갈 텐데 그런 거 계속 할 수밖에 없는 북한 체제의 어떤 특성이라면 핵으로 잡았기에는 답이 없다고 보거든요.
One former overseas worker, Kim Sung-chul, has agreed to come with us to a remote coal mine in the Sarawak jungle, where he fears his fellow countrymen are being used as modern-day slaves.
그 사람들이 여기에 좀 자신을 위해서가 아니고 북한 정권을 위해서 돈을 벌려고 왔다가 희생된 게 참 마음이 아프고 그 사람들의 인권을 좀 어떤 상황인지 알아보려고 왔어요.
Kim knows that the workers at the mine have been brainwashed into thinking that anyone from the outside world is a threat and that defectors like him deserve to die. But despite the risk, Kim is determined to go ahead.
Now stay close. Don't wait for shots.
When we enter the miners' dormitory, we find more than 20 Korean men asleep.
Hello, sir.
We didn't know that the officials guarding the slave workers had been given explicit orders about what to do if they're ever approached by television journalists.
We need your help.
Take the camera from them and smash it. Do not kill, but inflict a blow or fracture until the person's body is physically damaged.
All right, sir. We finished. We go now.
The workers spring into action as soon as they see our camera and begin to attack us exactly as the regime has instructed.
Okay. Okay, it's all right. No, sir. No, sir. No, we are British.
This man, who appears to be in charge, insists we have no right to be there and leads the effort to wrestle our camera from our grasp.
Sherry, no, we have asked permission. Sherry is not the boss. We said to the boss. All right. Let's all calm down. Let's all calm down, please. Let's all calm down. Okay.
Confronted by more than 20 angry miners, Kim still tries to reason with them.
Okay, be peaceful, please.
Another older official emerges to warn Kim to leave. By now, the Koreans have seized our main camera. They don't realize that we are still filming them using our hidden cameras. If the men realize Kim is a defector, they could abduct him and send him back to North Korea for certain execution.
저희가요 이런 거를 국제사회에 보도되면요 여러분들이 폭력을 행사하면 지금 북한 김정은 국방위원장한테도 안 좋아요. 그럼 여러분들한테도 피해가 가요.
The younger official returns our main camera, but with the memory card and battery removed. He isn't interested in answering our questions.
We didn't mean to harm you. Are you sorry? Yes, we're very sorry. Yes, sir, I am. Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question, sir? Why will you not answer us? Why will you not answer us? Is it working? Okay. No, let's go. Let's go. That's enough.
We were shaken but unhurt by our confrontation at the mine. But for Kim, the whole experience brought back terrible memories.
제가 그 북한 근로자들이 일하는 숙소에 들어간 순간 제가 러시아 벌목장에서 일하던 그때 생각이 났습니다. 정말로 마음이 아프고 괴로웠습니다. 아마 제가 거기에 혼자 들어갔다면 그 북한 근로자들이 저를 구속을 하고 아마 폭행을 가했을 것 같아요.
When we had first visited the mine asking about North Koreans, we were told to speak to one of the managers, a woman called Sherry. When we called her, Sherry had already been told about our violent encounter with the North Korean slave workers.
we have visited the mine and we have seen that these men are working there. And when we tried to take their pictures, they attacked us. Can you tell me why they would have done that?
I've heard about it. I don't think they attacked you. I think you had no permission to go into the mine.
Sherry readily confirmed that the mine owners were employing North Koreans.
Can you tell me why you are using these North Korean workers?
Because we had the permission from our country, and we also had the permission from North Korea, the country, the government, to employ the workers.
The money you pay goes to help the North Korean government continue to be in power and oppress its people.
That is correct.
We also asked Sherry what happened to the North Korean workers who died when there was an explosion at the mine.
9 people died at the mine, including some North Koreans, and that the North Koreans' bodies were burned at the mine. They were not sent back for burial. Is that true?
Whatever is here may be true, maybe not true. It's all hearsay. You've been lying.
I have an interest.
Liars, and I've been stalking you long enough.
Before hanging up, Sherry warned that she had reported us to the local police. Critics of the Malaysian government had warned us that some powerful figures were connected to the mine, and they wouldn't want their links with the North Korean regime to be publicized.
It's all about money, abuse of power and money. They just don't care. As long as the coal came out from their mine, of course they know. They just keep their mouth shut. They pretend not to know, and they hope that the public doesn't know.
There was now a real risk that we could be arrested and our secret filming seized. Kim knew he had to get out of the country as soon as possible.
저희가 북한 근로자들이 일하는 그 작업장에 갔는데 북한 근로자들이 저희의 촬영을 방해하고 아주 위협적으로 나오면서 카메라를 빼앗았습니다. 그리고 저희 카메라의 메모리를 빼앗고 주질 않았습니다. 거기에 제 얼굴이 들어 있었습니다. 그래서 오늘 저는 좀 북한의 위협을 좀 느꼈습니다. 아마 북한 당국은 이번 일을 상당한 위기라고 판단하고 대응을 할 것 같습니다. 아마.
Kim boarded an early flight the next morning to return to the safety of Seoul in South Korea.
와.
Okay, be peaceful, please, to get some information, please.
We showed our evidence to Marzuki Darasman, the man tasked by the United Nations with monitoring North Korea and its human rights record.
This is amazing. How could this happen in Sarawak, or for that matter, or in Malaysia, or in ASEAN for that matter? Yeah? And therefore, there will be a moment when something needs to be done about this.
Kim Sung-chul, a North Korean defector, has discovered evidence that North Korean slave workers are being used at a coal mine in Sarawak, Malaysia.
Okay, be peaceful, please.
If the workers and their government minders had realized Kim was a defector, they would have abducted him and sent him back to North Korea for almost certain execution. The United Nations has warned that any country which hosts North Korean workers may be helping to prop up the most cruel regime in the world. We asked Marzuki Darasman, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in North Korea, to review our secret filming. At first, he challenged us to convince him that the men we had filmed there were definitely from North Korea.
Well, yes, I mean, it's certainly a dramatic depiction of a scene here, but we're going into a technical issue here, and that is to establish that these are, in fact, North Korean workers. It could. I mean, the scenery here could be anywhere.
We pointed out that a propaganda poster can be seen on the wall of the workers' sleeping quarters, which reads, "Let's follow the leader of the party. Stick together, stick together." And on the opposite wall, there are photographs of the Kim dynasty, the three supreme leaders of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. If the workers' wages are being sent back to North Korea to keep the leadership in power and to fund its growing nuclear threat, the regime is guilty of trafficking its own people.
This could be the beginning of a compelling argument, a prosecution of a case against the DPRK. And so this is valuable information. This could be then brought out into the international public, and including the United Nations. We now have a clear case where North Korea is in fact deploying workers overseas. And so this adds on to the evidence that has been accumulated so far, and it goes quite far in corroborating what has been the belief of the international community.
Our secret filming also highlights a questionable relationship between the North Korean government, the government of Malaysia, and the coal mine owners in Sarawak.
The answer is very simple. It's all about money, abuse of power, and money.
Environmentalist Peter John Jaban fights to prevent the exploitation of his people and the natural resources of Sarawak.
I believe this is very unhealthy because knowing that North Korean government are sending slaves, and how could our politicians here or the coal mine accept the fact that this is not right. It's not right.
In the aftermath of the lethal explosion at the coal mine where North Koreans died, a local government minister claimed that the government of Sarawak had a legal right permitting North Korean workers to be brought here.
We know that the North Koreans are deploying forced workers outside the country. Here we have a clear instance where a host country is in fact collaborating with the DPRK in this case, and therefore this then makes the host country also culpable in that sense of being involved in trafficking of workers.
Any country doing business with North Korea should be in no doubt about the true nature of the regime. These drawings were smuggled out from concentration camps where thousands have endured deliberate starvation, torture, and execution.
Anything goes with this regime, and it sort of gives you a picture of a regime that will resort to anything to get its purpose done. Yeah? And this has continued up until today.
Despite having a broken economy, North Korea remains determined to continue building up its nuclear arsenal. In January 2016, the regime claimed to have detonated its first hydrogen bomb. Now, North Korea's appalling human rights record, including their use of modern-day slaves, is being directly linked to their nuclear weapons program. It's believed that the overseas workers' wages are smuggled back to the regime by a branch of the secret state known as Bureau 39. It's also involved in narcotics and arms dealing, all to help pay for more weapons of mass destruction.
If you look at the overseas working, they can earn a lot of money for the purpose of regime survivor, as well as the development of WMDs.
Dr. Shin Chang-hoon of the Asan Institute has traced how the North Korean regime keeps an iron grip on its workers overseas to ensure they bring in as much hard cash as possible.
North Korea's overseas workers program is quite unique in the sense that, well, always North Korea concludes a certain contracts with private sectors in the hosting countries. But the thing is that North Korean government is always involved in that kind of contract.
Until now, countries like Malaysia that wittingly or unwittingly play host to modern-day slaves have escaped proper international scrutiny.
So far, 45 countries have hired North Korean workers. So we can name and shame the hosting states. The violation of human rights in the hosting countries amounts to the slavery or otherwise contemporary forms of slavery. Usually they were under inhumane working conditions, so they don't have enough, equipment to do their work as well. So if you look at the inhumane conditions of workplaces, we can say it's definitely slavery situation.
From her exile in Britain, Claire Rocastle-Brown is a constant thorn in the side of the Malaysian government. She has traced the links from the explosion at the coal mine in the Sarawak jungle back to the political elites running the country.
We started digging and asking questions, and of course particularly looking at the ownership of the mine, something that nobody thought to undertake. And bit by bit we got a lot nearer the truth of what was going on, and it's very shocking. One of the surprising pieces of information that was flushed out by this tragedy, this tragic accident, was that there was in fact in place an agreement between the Sarawak government and North Korea to provide these workers for this dirty industry, this mine.
5 days after we captured proof of North Korean slave workers being exploited on Malaysian soil, the Malaysian government representative at the United Nations in New York voted against North Korea to stop its human rights abuses.
In this regard, we have supported the proposal for the Council to discuss the issue in front of us today.
We asked the Malaysian government for an interview, but they refused to participate. They previously said that they had every right to employ North Korean workers in Sarawak.
In this instance, of course, one has to confront the Malaysian government or the Sarawak government. Why is this happening in their backyard?
Back in the safety of South Korea, Kim continues to broadcast on shortwave radio to raise awareness inside North Korea about the plight of his fellow countrymen and to encourage others to defect.
단파 라디오를 소유하지 못하게 해요. 그래서 어떤 사람들은 중국에서 사고 어떤 사람은 이거 시장에서 만들어 파는 사람도 있어요.
Kim also sends DVDs and leaflets across the border by hot air balloon to tell his fellow countrymen and women the truth about the regime.
그런 생각이 희미하게는 있지만 얼마나 잘못된 건지 이 글로벌 기준에 봤을 때 이거는 얼마나 열악하고 우리가 엄청나게 얼마나 착취를 당하는지를 모르는 거예요. 당연한 거다 이렇게 생각을 해요. 하도 그게 이제 세뇌돼가고 뭔가를 해야 된다. 그래서 내가 나섰습니다마는 항상 우리 가족한테 가족의 소식을 듣고 이럴 때는 정말 내가 미안하죠. 죄송하고. 그렇지만 해야 되는, 누군가는 해야 되는 일이거든요.
Kim's hope is that when the world learns the truth about the regime's use of its own people as slaves, the international community will finally take effective action against North Korea and the countries that allow this slavery to continue.